Megan Ashford was 36 when a man she had never met before asked her to step aside with him during a corporate networking party in Boston's Back Bay and told her something that made the world around her suddenly feel unfamiliar. It was late evening. The event was held in a modern glass office building overlooking the city. Soft music played in the background while small groups of professionals talked about projects, investments, promotions, normal life. Waiters moved between conversations carrying trays of wine glasses. The air smelled of expensive perfume and polished wood. Nothing about that moment looked important from the outside. Just another business event. Just another conversation between strangers. But Megan felt a strange pressure in her chest, like something invisible had just shifted. She had stepped away from the main crowd to answer a message when the man approached her politely, asking if she was Megan Ashford. The man introduced himself as Thomas Remington. His voice was steady, his movements precise. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't emotional. He looked like someone who had already gone through the worst part alone and now spoke only from control. When he said her husband's name, he didn't say it with anger. He said it like someone stating a fact. "Your husband is sleeping with my wife." Megan didn't react the way she once thought she would. No tears, no shock, no dramatic reaction. Instead, she felt something heavy and cold settle deep inside her stomach. Suspicion keeps you restless, but confirmation has weight, a final kind of gravity. Thomas glanced around and suggested they move somewhere quieter. They found an empty conference room just off the main hall, where the music from the party became distant and muted behind closed doors. Thomas placed a thick folder on the table between them, but didn't open it. His hand rested on it for a second before he looked directly at her and said something she would later replay in her mind many times. "If you make the first move, you lose control." Megan looked at the folder. Her hand stayed still, but her pulse had started to accelerate. She had imagined this conversation many nights while lying awake beside a man who was already emotionally somewhere else. She thought she might break, or explode, or demand answers. Instead, she did nothing. Thomas spoke quietly, almost like explaining a business strategy. "Judges don't care about pain," he said. "They care about proof. If you react emotionally, you protect the people who betrayed you. If you wait, you protect yourself." He told her he had already learned this lesson the hard way. He had already spoken to attorneys, already started collecting evidence, dates, hotels, phone records, patterns. Megan listened without interrupting. Somewhere between his calm voice and the distant noise of the party, she understood something important. This wasn't about revenge. This was survival. And for the first time, she understood this was no longer just a broken marriage. This was a situation that required strategy. Megan found herself thinking about Jason, about the late evenings that had slowly become normal, about the way his phone was now always turned screen down on the table, about how their home had become quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar, not because they were peaceful, but because something between them had quietly disappeared without a single argument. Thomas slowly pushed the folder a little closer toward her, but still didn't open it. "You don't need to decide anything today," he said calmly. "Just promise yourself one thing. Don't act too fast." Megan gave a small nod. At the time, she didn't fully understand it, but that quiet conversation that night was the exact moment her life stopped moving on autopilot and started moving with awareness. Before everything began to fall apart, she truly believed her life was stable. She had been married to Jason Smith for almost 10 years. He worked as a supply chain manager for a distribution company. His hours were long but structured, predictable. Megan worked remotely as a copywriter, creating marketing content and brand stories from their apartment. Most of her days were spent at the kitchen table with her laptop, a cup of coffee, and quiet background music playing from a small speaker. They were not the kind of couple who tried to impress people. No dramatic social media posts, no expensive surprises, no big romantic gestures. Their relationship looked simple from the outside. Their marriage was built on habits: Saturday grocery shopping, Friday night takeout, Sunday cleaning routines, evenings on the couch watching movies where Jason usually fell asleep halfway through. Jason was never very expressive emotionally, but he was dependable. If something broke, he fixed it. If something needed to be handled, he handled it. If she needed practical support, he was always there. He rarely raised his voice, rarely complained, never forgot responsibilities. For a long time, Megan believed this kind of steadiness meant safety. She told herself this was what real adult love looked like. Only much later did she understand how easy it is to mistake emotional distance for emotional stability. Jason didn't talk much about his feelings, and she convinced herself that meant he was simply reserved. He didn't share many details about work, and she told herself that meant he was responsible and focused. There were no dramatic red flags back then. No fights. No obvious coldness she could point to. Just a peaceful home and a predictable rhythm of life. Her parents liked him. Her friends told her she was lucky to have such a calm marriage. And she believed them. She truly believed that the absence of conflict meant the presence of trust. What she did not understand yet was that sometimes a home becomes quiet, not because it is safe, but because someone has already started leaving emotionally. At that time, Megan believed she had chosen well. She believed consistency meant commitment. She would later realize those are not always the same thing. The changes didn't happen overnight. There was no single moment Megan could point to and say, that was when everything started to fall apart. Instead, they appeared quietly, almost politely, slipping into their daily life as small differences that slowly formed a pattern she could no longer ignore. Jason started coming home later than usual. At first, it was around 10, then 11, eventually closer to midnight. He explained that a new project at work was creating extra pressure. She believed him. His job had always been demanding, and long hours were nothing new. Then something else changed. His phone. It used to sit casually on the kitchen counter, screen visible, nothing to hide. Now it was always turned face down or kept in his pocket. When notifications came, he checked them quickly, almost automatically, then locked the screen before she could even glance in that direction. Megan told herself she was overthinking. That stress does strange things to people. Then she noticed a new smell in the bathroom. Not soap, not deodorant. Cologne. Jason had never worn cologne in almost a decade of marriage. When she mentioned it, he brushed it off casually and said someone from work had given him a sample. His appearance started changing too. New shirts, better fitted, more expensive. His haircuts moved from the small neighborhood barbershop to a modern salon across the city. None of these things were wrong by themselves. People are allowed to change. What disturbed her wasn't the changes. It was how suddenly they all appeared together. On weekends, he started going to the gym regularly. He would leave late morning and come back early afternoon, freshly showered and strangely energized. Not physically tired, not sore, just lighter, happier, but not with her. Megan tried to be supportive. She packed dinners when he worked late, sent small messages asking if he needed anything. His responses became shorter, practical, emotionally empty. Sometimes hours passed before he replied. When he finally did, the words felt distant, like they were written out of obligation rather than care. If you have ever felt your home slowly become emotionally colder without any fight, you understand that feeling. Nothing dramatic enough to confront, nothing concrete enough to accuse, but everything slightly wrong. At night, she would lie awake listening to his breathing and wonder when exactly things had shifted, when the distance had started, when she had begun feeling alone beside someone she still shared a bed with. She wasn't searching for proof yet. She was searching for reassurance, but her body already sensed something her heart wasn't ready to accept. She kept telling herself not to overreact, to be patient, to be understanding, that every marriage goes through stressful periods. Still, a quiet voice inside her kept repeating the same thought. Something isn't right, and sometimes the most unsettling thing about betrayal is not discovering it. It's feeling it long before you can prove it. By the time that evening arrived, Megan already felt something inside her life had shifted. She just didn't know yet that someone else had already confirmed it. And that night, she would finally understand what her instincts had been trying to tell her for months. Starting the next morning, Megan began living what felt like two completely different lives inside the same reality. From the outside, nothing changed. She still made coffee in the mornings, still asked Jason how his day was, still reminded him about bills, groceries, small everyday things that used to feel like partnership. She still smiled when it was expected, still said goodnight, still played her role perfectly. But inside, something fundamental had shifted, something quiet but irreversible. She was no longer just a wife trying to save a marriage. She was watching, listening, noticing. She had stopped believing words. Now she believed patterns. She started with the smallest details, writing down the time Jason left, the time he returned, the days he stayed late, the same explanations repeated in slightly different ways. She wasn't spying. She wasn't breaking privacy. She was simply paying attention to reality. Patterns started forming faster than she expected. Almost like once you allow yourself to see, you cannot stop seeing. One evening, Jason said he was staying late at the office again. Megan drove past his building without telling him. His car wasn't there. Her hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, but she forced herself not to react. One missing car meant nothing. Emotionally, it meant everything. Still, she wrote it down. Another day, he mentioned a new gym membership. She asked casually which one, like a normal conversation. Later, she checked. He had registered, but his attendance history showed almost nothing. That was when she understood something painful. Knowing someone is lying without being able to prove it officially feels like hearing an alarm that nobody else can hear. You cannot relax, but you cannot act either. Thomas stayed in contact, but never emotionally. Only facts. Only timelines. Only things that could survive a courtroom. No speculation, no anger, only reality. Eventually, he showed her what he had already gathered. Photographs, receipts, travel records, and later something even harder to watch. Videos. Jason entering Olivia's building. Olivia opening the door like she was expecting him. The way they kissed told its own story. Not excitement, not new passion. Familiarity. Routine. Megan watched everything without crying. That surprised even her. Instead, something inside her became very still. Colder, sharper, more controlled. That was the moment she emotionally stepped out of the marriage even before the paperwork existed. Then came the conversation about money and timing. Thomas explained that filing too early could destroy everything they had carefully built. Panic makes people dangerous. Panic makes people hide assets, delete evidence, rewrite history. But patience turns patterns into facts. He did not offer money as a transaction. He offered stability, space, time to think without desperation, time to prepare instead of react. Megan hesitated not because of pride, but because accepting help meant accepting a truth she had tried to avoid. The marriage she believed in was already gone. The next discovery came quietly and accidentally. While searching for a simple household document, she found something she was never meant to see. A lease agreement, a 2-bedroom condo in Cambridge, Jason's signature, weeks older than his explanations about work stress. Her hands didn't shake. She simply photographed every page carefully and placed everything back exactly as she found it. That was the moment she understood she was no longer reacting emotionally. She was operating strategically. Thomas later confirmed what she already understood. Shared housing changes everything legally. It removes excuses. It proves intention. It turns suspicion into structure. Then came the Florida trip. Jason mentioned Miami casually like any other work obligation. 3 days, important meetings. Megan smiled, helped him choose a shirt, told him to travel safely. Thomas confirmed Olivia had booked the same flights. Same dates, same hotel. That was the moment Megan stopped waiting for proof. She started preparing for the end. By the time Jason returned relaxed and comfortable, she already knew everything. Where he slept, where they ate, how freely they behaved when they believed nobody was watching. What surprised her most was not the betrayal anymore. It was her own calm. The final phase happened quietly. Attorneys preparing documents, evidence structured like architecture, timelines aligned, 2 divorce filings submitted almost simultaneously. No confrontation, no dramatic exposure. Just reality catching up. When Jason received the papers, his reaction followed the exact psychological pattern Thomas predicted. Shock, fear, negotiation. But Megan was no longer emotionally available for that stage. She was finishing something she had already emotionally survived months earlier. Court was quiet, professional, almost cold. No shouting, no accusations, just documentation. Photos, contracts, movement records. Evidence never needs to raise its voice. It only needs to exist. The marriage officially ended months after it had already ended emotionally. Quietly. After everything was finalized, Megan noticed something she did not expect. Relief feels nothing like victory. Victory is loud. Relief is silent. And silence finally returned to her home in a healthy way. The kind of silence where your nervous system finally rests. The kind where you no longer wait for disappointment. Looking back, she says there are things she wishes someone had told her earlier. Trust patterns more than promises. Words can be adjusted. Behavior rarely lies. Do not confront someone when you are still searching for clarity. Confront them when you already have it. Protect your finances early. Protect your documents early. Protect the people who support you before crisis forces you to. Silence is not weakness when it is chosen. Waiting is not surrender. Waiting is choosing the moment that protects your future instead of your emotions. This was never really a story about revenge. It was a story about dignity. Megan did not rebuild her life because she waited. She rebuilt it because she waited with intention. She did not win because she stayed silent. She won because she understood exactly when silence becomes strength. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling us what you would have done in the main character's place, and subscribe to Sinner Stories so you never miss a new video.